All right, Daniel, welcome. Thanks for joining me tonight. We're going to be, for those of you just tuning in, we're going to be going over some questions that we've prepared so that individuals can better understand what we're going to be offering in this course and getting a little bit more into the deeper elements so that they can truly understand that this is not just a normal Prima course, but we're bringing something totally new to the alchemical education space. So, Daniel Wiseman, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to see you tonight, Taylor.
You too, man. You too. All right. Well, let's get right into it. So, who is this class for, and what will they be able to do by the end of the program?
Yeah, so this really is our gateway herbal program, meaning we want this to be accessible to the beginner. But of course, we also see a huge value for people who may be quite experienced in Spagyrics already. So we're trying to be a little bit universal with the approach here and again, make it accessible for everybody, but interesting for people who have quite a bit of experience as we're adding a lot of our own unique takes on things. As far as what you're going to get out of it in the end, this first program, Vegetabilia 1, it's focused on three specific types of preparations. So by the end of it, you're going to know multiple ways of preparing three different types of spagyric medicines. One that's most specific to physical health, one that is most specific to emotional health, and then finally one that is specific to spiritual or mental health. And again, there's going to be a variety of different pathways we'll describe for each of these types of preparations. And by the end of it, you should know quite thoroughly how to get from point A to Z in multiple different ways, depending on how you want to work.
Okay, awesome. So, just to be clear, we're not going to be just teaching the basic plant tincture spagyric, or the common essence that we see really touted in traditional recipes or that might be available in the education space today.
Yeah, there's going to be some crossover. I think there's a lot of, even though there's a lot of unique ways that we approach the process, of course, there's going to be a lot of common building blocks that are featured, based on, things that we've learned from our teachers, things that we've learned from the literature on the subject. Although there's certainly a bit of a unique spin, largely in the sense of, I think, helping shine some light on what I'm seeing as some misinterpretations of the spagyric literature.
Okay. All right. Now, getting right into the topic of proper spagyrics, what, in your opinion, defines properly executed spagyric lab work? And where do you often see most practitioners unknowingly fall short?
Well, I think a real strong guiding principle in alchemy and spagyrics in general is to follow nature. So I think that is one aspect of the work that we want to adhere to at all times is looking at the rules of how nature evolves itself and finding the mirror images of those processes in the lab work and not cutting corners necessarily, but the spagyric process or alchemical processes, they do tend to kind of expedite the process, yet again adhering to this central blueprint of how nature unfolds itself. Um, Proper is it's a wide term. I think a big focus that we're going to have in this class is really heavily focusing on the details, going into the nuance of everything, rather than not glossing over any one particular thing, but really digging into the nitty-gritty details of everything that we're doing, both in the sense of practical application, but also understanding of two different things really: the physicality of the processes or the chemistry of the processes, but also the understanding of the philosophy behind the processes as well. Because I mean, in this way, we we find a way to really unravel a lot of the philosophical and allegorical and symbolic language that you find in Spagyrics and alchemy. I find that having a modern chemical or physical understanding of these operations and really diving into the details of the best way that you could possibly do it helps see deeper into the again the philosophical truths that underlay under all of these processes.
So let's give them like a solid example. And like, what does like truly full spectrum extraction mean in chemical terms when we're talking about a spagyric tincture, for example?
Yeah, so in this case, we're looking to scoop up as broad of a spectrum of both the therapeutic and nutritional compounds found in plants. And of course, with that, we're going to have to employ a multitude of solvents or menstruums in order to grab at all those different things. So of course, you're going to find some compounds which are more water soluble, and then some that are alcohol soluble, and everything kind of in between. So those are two main parts, which I think is a little bit more common knowledge. Of course, you see a lot of dual extracted products in conventionally created extracts of plants and mushrooms and things like that. But of course, with spagyrics and alchemy, we have this third component of the mineral salt content of the materia that you're working with, and bringing that into play, I think, arguably is the most full spectrum that you can get. So you're getting all the the nutritional compounds, the therapeutic compounds, but also the very, very important mineral salt content of whatever materia that you're working with.
Let's go like one layer deeper and just kind of talk about like, because this is probably going to be top of mind for a lot of people who have, made plant spagyrics over their practice or even in their business or apothecary. And so we see this like common practice of just adding the salts back into the alcohol tincture. We've seen videos with those salts under vacuum, having a reaction process taking place. But, I think it's very common where most plant spagyric practitioners still see salts at the bottom of that extract. And so in our conversations, we've talked about how in the process we're going to be teaching, we're going to be talking about how this can be circulated and actually added back into the tincture so that we don't have anything fall out at all. So I just kind of want to hear your take on that, because I think that's very important for a lot of people to understand, is like there's actually a big missing step in what is considered to be common plant spagyric methodology.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, but I think you're right. It's really a very important point that we want to impress in this class, because I see a lot of misunderstanding of the work. Also, sometimes just a glossing over of it as well. I want to be clear that there's nothing new under the sun. We may have some unique interpretations and way of teaching, maybe some new tricks and ways to use equipment, and new views on, let's say, chemistry or things like that. But the alchemical process, or the spagyric process as a whole, it's always been there. And what I see often today is there's a lot of glossing over of really important points, and that's something that we want to kind of bring these glossed over points or misunderstood points back into the limelight to highlight a really important aspect of spagyric work, which is wholeness, right? I mean, if we look at the principles of Spagyria, the whole idea is to take something apart, refine it, and then bring it back together again in wholeness. And so in that final step, that's where we see some confusion, or glossing over of the best way to actually reach a final, homogeneous, complete, single thing at the end. Like you said, in a lot of ways that spagyrics are being made today, there's this undissolved portion of salt, and that's indicating that there's still work to be done, because it hasn't been brought into a homogeneous single substance in the end. It's not completely dissolved, or it's not, in the case of a solid extract, it's not become a homogeneous solid. There's a separation still, which for me is an indicator that there's still some work to be done. And this is an area that we're really going to focus in on in this class, is to make sure that we really bring all of the parts of the medicine back together in its full state, rather than having, something kind of left out still.
Okay. All right. And so, from a chemical standpoint, what distinguishes a true spagyric preparation versus a high quality extract or tincture?
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of work to be done, in the realm of research into this. Of course, there's really hardly any modern research into the subject, and what we can kind of lean on is, you know, aspects of chemistry that we already understand, that we could look at the spagyric process and see the building blocks of it, what bits and bytes are involved here, and start to hypothesize what kind of reactions we might be getting when we create spagyrics, through a multitude of methods. And if we were to summarize, I think a key point that kind of sticks out comparatively to, let's say, like a more conventionally made extract, one that's not spagyric, like not containing the mineral salts, which is again one of the key points of this, is the conversion of particularly alcohol or oil soluble compounds into water soluble compounds. You see this in alchemy a lot, where there's this reversing of polarities. There's
Yeah.
like turning the fixed into the volatile, or we could look at also pH. You'll see acids turning into alkalis, and then eventually reaching a balance point in the middle. And that's something unique to spagyrics, is that when you follow the proper methodology, essentially all of these originally alcohol soluble compounds, which many of have limited bioavailability, can be converted into water soluble compounds. And when we look at comparable chemistry, let's say looking at different types of pharmaceutical drugs, even that are using, let's say, types of acids that we find in plants, like salicylic acid, for example, in an aspirin, we see that modern pharmacy, modern pharmacology tends to convert these compounds into water-soluble forms to make them more bioavailable, to lower the threshold dose for getting the therapeutic effect that you're looking for, reducing side effects. There's this whole slew of reasons why, again, modern pharmacology will create these water soluble compounds of active drugs that they're making, and spagyrics really mirrors this process, again, in converting these therapeutic compounds with limited bioavailability into more water soluble compounds. And so
Okay.
that's, I think, a chemical chemical backing for this particular technique.
Okay. All right. And then if we're looking at this from like the chemical standpoint, we're looking at all the different constituents and, compounds that are in there. How do we start to determine which constituents of a plant that we really want to preserve, transform, or exclude during the extraction process?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's something that we actually dive quite deeply into it in this first course. Again, the course is covering three specific types of preparations. One preparation that is focused on physical health, one preparation that's focused on emotional health, and one that's focused on mental health. And one way that we can use like an alchemical framework, let's say, to start to differentiate between these different aspects of ourself, because of course there's no there's no rigid, hard line between any of these things. You know, our physical and our emotional and our mental is kind of all flowing with itself all the time. It's like, you know, like temperature, like where does hot and cold begin and end, right? It's a spectrum. So
Yeah.
they flow into one another, but there are ways to bring focus into each of these three aspects of our physical health. So, in the sense of deciding what goes in and what doesn't go in, and really to better word it, it's not about what goes in and what doesn't go in, it's about how do we transform different aspects or utilize different aspects of the unique therapeutic qualities of plants. Because in alchemy, like we were just speaking about with this idea of holism, we're really not looking to throw anything away. With alchemy, we're looking to transform. Again, we can, you know, use nature as the you know, the beacon of truth here, where, you know, nature doesn't throw things away. Nature reuses things. You know, although something may be cast away or changed in one way or another, it's always being uptaken back into the system. And with Spagyrics, you're always doing that. So to give a couple of examples, you know, we could think of physiological health as maybe the most fixed or like heavy aspect of our health, you know, because it's our physical body. This is the anchor that we're in. So we could think of some both physical and philosophical reasonings for why this is the heavy fixed aspect of ourself. And so to focus on that, with spagyric medicine making, this is where we can really draw on what you were speaking about earlier, the full spectrum of a plant's medicine. So in this case, in spagyric terms, we're looking to draw in all of what's known as the fixed sulfur, all of the non-volatile compounds of the plant, and as well as the volatile sulfur of the plant, you know, often represented as the essential oils or the easily distilled aspects of plant compounds. So for physical health, that's where we're looking to capture that whole broad spectrum. But as we like move up into these more subtle aspects of our health, let's say our emotional health or our mental health, this is where we kind of like music, really, like composing music, because, you know, again, alchemy and spagyrics, it's an art form, and this is where we can start to bring focus to certain, let's say, voices in the choir or instruments in the orchestra, kind of quiet down certain aspects and amplify other ones. So in the case of, let's say, emotional health we can associate with kind of like the mid-level of volatility of like the therapeutic aspects of plants. Remember, we're starting with the physical one. We're getting everything, so it's got all the heaviest stuff, which is the predominance of the active ingredients of plants are mostly non-volatile. And then as we move up the ladder, we can start to focus just on the more volatile ones. So in this case, a great example is the essential oil of a plant, like the complete essential oil of a plant. We can work with, let's say, boiling water as like a temperature differential or a marker of temperature of what we're going to get. So if we're using boiling water, we're going to get the full spectrum of the plant's essential oil. And in alchemy or spagyrics, it's the volatile sulfur, which again can be represented by, or let's say held by, the essential oil. It's associated with the emotional body. So in this case, if we want to focus in on the emotions, rather than keeping all of these non-volatile aspects of the plant, which are more heavily associated with the physical body or physical health, we can separate out just that volatile sulfur principle or the essential oil, again being one representative of it. And then all of these fixed compounds can be converted into mineral salts, adding a little bit extra of an anchor. Because again, now this medicine, the sulfur aspect of it becomes more volatile, meaning it needs a little bit heavier of an anchor to balance it out and keep it in balance with itself as a final preparation. And then finally, the most lofty aspect of our health, mental health or spiritual health. This is where you focus in on the absolutely most volatile aspects of a plant. And this is where you see mostly Mostly like solvents, unique solvents that can be produced from plants being leaned on. So here's where we have different types of like alcohol, of course, is one representative of this like mercurial aspect of the plant, the most volatile aspect of the plant. That's one of the most commonly known. But then there's also other compounds like ketones, which can be brought over, or there's aromatic alcohols, different from ethyl alcohol. Let's say um, like benzyl alcohol is a common um, alcohol in plants. So with this final preparation, tuned to more mental health, this is where we can lean on the most volatile compounds that we find in the plants, leaving everything else behind to be converted into mineral salts. And in this case, it would have the most amount of mineral salts in all three of these preparations. Again, requiring it because that extra lofty, extra volatile aspect of the plant's constituents that we're focused on in this preparation need a bit more of an anchor to balance themselves out again as the final product. So, in each case, we can make the argument that we're doing something full spectrum because we're taking the entirety of the plant and we are kind of shuffling it around in different ways in balance with itself, but bringing a focus point on different aspects of that plant. Sometimes I like to make the example of, you could think of like a friend that you have. Your friend has an abundance of qualities about them. They may, have all these different likes and dislikes, and they may be funny, and maybe they have different talents and things like that. So that's like the full spectrum of your friend. And sometimes that's great and it's exactly what you want. And sometimes in certain situations, there's unique aspects of your friend's qualities as a human being that are best suited for a particular activity or something like that. Like maybe you need to have a conversation and that's, requires some emotional intelligence. So, you don't need to know about their basketball skills in that moment. Like you're leaning on them for a good conversation with some emotional depth. Or
Yeah.
maybe you had a problem to solve or something like that that requires some sort of really like mental, psychological aspect of life. And maybe your friend's a real brain and could help you kind of determine, a good route of action through a more mental aspect of their personality, right? It's not to say any of these aspects are good or bad. It's just in some cases there's different aspects of the qualities of something that are good for some things and really good for particular things. And this is a way to make medicine in a way that helps just zone in on these specific attributes of plant medicine, but again, still done in a way that is holistic because nothing is left out in the process. Everything gets brought back in, albeit some aspects of it changed, like in the case of a compound in the plant that gets calcinated and turned into more mineral salts or something. It's still there, just in a different form.
So really just about starting to have the right job, like the right tool or right chemical and constituent for the right job.
Exactly.
Cool. Okay. Well, speaking on the mineral salts, because I know that's like the big one. So, that a lot of herbal alchemists either overlook a lot of things. We referenced that we're going to be talking about the hidden volatile salt in the plants. And why is that so important?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of reasons for it. I mean, there are chemical reasons and philosophical reasons. And again, I love always looking at these things from both perspectives because I think it's really it's the right way in the sense of holism. There's the meaning of things, and then there's the matter of things, the physicality of things. And I think looking at both really helps you zero in on the truth, or zero in on an issue you're trying to solve in your work or something like that. So on the philosophical side of things, this it's considered a great arcanum, like a great secret of alchemy or of spagyrics, to be able to render the body, the salt, the heaviest aspect of the work, volatile. Because again, it's completely reversing polarity. You've got something, let's say in the case of plant-based spagyrics, you've got the mineral salts which are largely non-volatile. Let's say like, the water-soluble salt of land-based plants is predominantly potassium. You get it in the form of mostly potassium carbonate, and it's a non-volatile salt. It doesn't sublimate, and that's what modern science will say. Like, hey, this salt doesn't volatilize. Yet we've got all
Right.
this alchemical literature saying that this can be done, and you've got many authors. Some authors spending their entire lives dedicated to this work
Yeah.
of trying to volatilize this salt, which is supposed to not become volatile, because again, in alchemy, we need to reverse polarities as part of the process of reaching a state of balance. So this is something that we're going to address, both philosophically and chemically in this course. Really, as I think of it as an introduction to this, because it's such a vast subject. But we're going to learn about some different salts. That's one thing I think is really important in this subject, is that not all volatile salts are the same. There can be volatile salts which are confusing in the sense of being misleading. For example, there are terpenoid salts, which, with under certain conditions can sublimate, so whatever work you may be doing, you may have a salt appear like in your condenser, in your glassware, that, something obviously has sublimated, and just for people who don't know the term, sublimation is when like a solid turns into a gas and then resolidifies as a solid, in some sort of device that's fit for the work. So there could be organic salts, which are not mineral salts, right? Like a terpenoid salt, like camphor or menthol. And these can be confusing aspects of the work, because again, you see a volatile salt appearing, yet it's not the one that you were hoping that it was. You haven't
Right.
reached the pinnacle of again reversing the polarity of the fixed mineral salts of the plant. It's just something that looks like a mineral salt, but it's not. It's just an organic aspect of essentially the essential oil. Then we have other salts, which can be teased out with a variety of methods, and in this case, these are truly non-organic mineral salts, which can be sublimated, which can turn from a solid into a gas and back into a solid once again. And so we're going to dive deep into some different methods of teasing those salts out, with a variety of methods, both wet and dry, so to speak. Again, the wet and dry paths are, some are with really high heat, and some are just using types of menstruums. And so we'll look deeper at some of those beginning lessons of finding these hidden salts, because again, this is, I mean, it's one of the most closely guarded secrets of
Yeah.
alchemy, again, because it is such a monumental feat to take the most fixed of something and convert it into its complete opposite of volatile. So we hope we'll shed a little bit of light on this and dispel some misunderstandings about it, and kind of just demystify it a little bit. I think it's a good time to reveal some things that have been kind of kept closely, um, because I think there's a lot more to unravel about some of these mysteries. It's not We're not claiming to be revealing the grand truth of everything. This is the beginning of the work, and I feel like a lot of us are kind of stuck um, at a certain point in the work because of not really understanding this aspect of the volatile salts, which are a very important aspect of the work. So we want to help kind of lift the veil a little bit and let people grow out of, again, some misunderstandings about this aspect of the work.
Yeah, it seems that there is a interesting kind of opportunity that we have here, where alchemy has come into the limelight over the past 10 years, and now it's like we've had the culmination of, like, people revealing metallic works and metallic oils, and that's starting to become like aware and like the spiritual awareness of the internet. And then we've seen the downsides of that, where like toxic materials can be produced if there's not like real integrity and care and knowledge and understanding of the chemistry aspect. And now it's like, it's a wide open door, because there's this, it feels to me like there's this new practice, like a new level of practice that can really be had with alchemy. And I feel very fortunate that we're able to kind of present these time-tested recipes, but through a more modern, grounded, practical lens, where there's not so much mystical shrouds surrounding these things.
Yeah, and to speak more on that, I think you're right. It's there's a temporal issue here, which I think is deserving of kind of opening up some things that were once kept heavily guarded, because we really are living in an age of information. Our ability to access information about alchemy is really, as far as we can see anyways, in history, unparalleled. And
Yeah.
with that comes a new set of risks, right? Because it's so easily accessible and it's becoming more popular, more and more people are turning towards this. And, the game of risk is changing as a result of that, because it's so easily accessible. And I think as a result of that, it's requiring some different sets of rules to keep itself in balance and keep people making good medicine and making safe medicine, and also just encouraging our own unique evolution into this, and not getting stuck in dogmatic aspects of alchemy,
Yeah.
because I think that there's purpose and reason behind secrecy, and I'm not going to criticize all of it as if it's wrong or something like that. I think there's many reasons to be cautious about how you disseminate information, and certain times people could be jailed and killed for this information, or
Sure.
sometimes it's not meant to get into certain hands for righteous reasons and rather than egotistical
Yeah.
ones. But, if we don't evolve our understanding and relationship with alchemy, then we're doomed to, fall prey to new problems created by dogmatic belief, and that's my argument for being a bit more open about some things that maybe were more closely guarded before. Because, like you said, um, there's a lot of new risk with a lot of this work being so accessible to people. And I think that this helps mitigate some of that risk. And I think that you know, it's, it's time. Yeah, I think if we were to take the tria prima of Spagyrics, the salt, the sulfur, the mercury, like an active principle, a passive principle, and a neutral principle, um, historically, I feel like there's a good correlation showing that, we're now either beginning, or have just entered into like a mercurial phase of history. We see that again with AI and how fast information can travel and how much information we have. We live in an age of information. Mercury represents the
Yeah.
mind, and information, and dissemination of information, education. All of these things. So in a sense, I feel that it's again, this is just another aspect of why I feel right now it's a time of revealing or uncovering, an apocalyptic time, if you will, in like the most literal sense of the word, apocalypse meaning revealing. So it feels natural and timely to me to talk about some of these things, because there are more secrets in alchemy, and one of my favorite philosophical takes on it, um, from the author Jean Despaigne, is that secrets are for God to keep and for man to figure out. The idea that man does not usurp nature, and it's part of it, and nature has its um, inherent guidelines and safety devices built into itself to protect itself. So, that these secrets essentially reveal themselves as you're ready for them, or as us as humankind are ready for them. So not to completely pass off any personal responsibility. I think a lot about personal responsibility with alchemical education, and but that being said, I feel intuitively that there's something there to this idea that really nature, which we are part of, protects itself, and we could apply that to so-called secret keeping as well.
Cool. Cool. So getting into the modern versus ancient secret keeping here, what modern laboratory tools or techniques have meaningfully improved upon classical spagyric methods?
Well, I mean, yeah, there's a lot, I think. In one sense, we no longer need to hire hire people to keep our fires going and keep them at the right temperature. The so-called puffers of
Yeah,
alchemical history, just at the bellows, just blowing air onto fires for days or weeks or months.
I was just talking about this with someone last night, actually at a potluck. They were like, "Oh, so alchemy. So how's it different now?" And I'm like, "Well, for one thing, we don't have to have people, keeping 800 Fahrenheit fire, or 1,000 Fahrenheit fire for weeks on end."
No, yeah. So there's some definitely some big advantages in the sense of it being easier. We can get the heating mantle with the digital thermostat in it and dial it into a single degree of temperature, and keep it there for as long as we'd like, and fairly affordably too now as lab equipment becomes more popularly adopted by the general public for whatever use. It's relatively accessible.
Yeah.
Electricity, of course, is a huge benefit. Um, One thing that I want to highlight, because I mean, I could think of a zillion different things that are great about, of course, modern laboratory equipment and glassware and accessibility and all the rest. But something that's, I think, particularly important for the plant kingdom is vacuum.
Yeah.
With plants, of course, we have so many delicate, heat-sensitive compounds, which are denatured or even destroyed or perhaps lost in certain processes which volatilize them. So working gently is really important with the plant kingdom in order to maintain the integrity of these really volatile compounds, particularly in the case where, you know, again, with this concept of sulfur, the soul of something, we have the higher soul, we have the lower soul. The higher soul is said to be invincible. When it's held to the test of fire, like it doesn't burn, it flies off. Whereas the more fixed
Yeah.
compounds of the plant will burn. So the lower soul is, is mortal in a sense, where the higher soul is immortal. And this higher soul, of course, has a lot of heat sensitive compounds, and we can lose it if we work too hot, in various ways, either through vaporizing it or denaturing it with heat, or even destroying the true value of it. So by employing vacuum, we're able to work at much lower temperatures, and protect these heat sensitive compounds. And I think this is also a unique um, I feel like it's a unique example, like a physical, chemical example of a philosophical truth, which is the idea of a hermetic seal, right?
Yeah.
With vacuum, you're emptying your laboratory setup of both oxygen and positive pressure. So in a way, we are you know kicking everything out except for the materia that we're working with. We're creating a truly hermetically sealed egg, if you
Yeah.
will, in a material sense, where the other material aspects, which may not be necessary or even harmful to the work, are being removed completely by this. And again, it's allowing us to work at this much lower temperature, because when we apply vacuum, of course, boiling points of everything, they go down, because of this reduced pressure inside of your laboratory equipment. And it's interesting because when you look at the classical literature on plant work, we often see a suggestion to work basically within body heat, or maybe
Yeah.
sometimes feverish heat. So we can say we're working somewhere in and around 40 degrees Celsius, and I think it's a great suggestion because almost any compound that we're looking to work with plant medicine is not going to be destroyed and denatured by such a gentle temperature. So I think following that, classical, traditional bit of wisdom, we can avoid some of these losses to the medicine that we're making, and vacuum really helps achieve that. So I'd like to highlight that as a really important modern adaptation and advancement that we've made.
Cool. I dig it. Okay. So bridging from that, what are some of the more common technical mistakes that you can see in the Spagyric work? And how are we going to be training students to avoid that?
Well, we've touched on it a little bit already, and I won't go too deep into it, of course, because we'll turn it into a whole class. But there is this aspect of the salt, which many, I'll say, many interpretations of modern spagyric recipes for tinctures and essences and elixirs, whatever they may be called, they result in an undissolved salt, and oftentimes
Yep.
it's the suggestion is to filter it out, and sometimes it's classified as the deadhead. The deadhead is the useless part that you throw away, and I think this is really a fatal flaw in understanding of spagyric medicine, because I would argue that it's actually the most potent medicine that you find in
Yep.
that undissolved salt at this stage in the
Yep.
work, and that there are further steps to be taken. So that's one, again, misunderstanding, misinterpretation, or glossing over of an aspect of the work that I think is really important, and we're certainly going to highlight in these classes. Another aspect of the work is, aspects of safety, I think, are a big part of it too. For example, calcination. Calcination, of course, it has its inherent risk of, this is where you're burning the plant material down to an ash in order to extract its mineral salts. And of course, there's the inherent risk of fire. But something that I see often is the struggle to find materials which are appropriate for calcination, not only to be able to withstand such high temperatures like dry heat without falling apart instantly or melting or something like that, because you are using high heat, let's say somewhere in the
Yeah.
vicinity of 400 degrees Celsius at least, if not maybe or 650 degrees Celsius sometimes, to get a nice clean white ash. So there's the aspect of something that is a material that is sturdy enough to safely calcine something, but then with this high temperature, and of course with the ashes of plants are loaded with these alkali mineral salts. And when you heat these alkali mineral salts, let's say with something that is metal, for example, um, there can be toxic salts like heavy metals and things that can be leached from those metals if you're reaching these high temperatures, and the material, if it's containing a large amount of these potentially harmful metals, like for example, stainless steel. Now, I'll say that certain types of stainless steel, certain qualities of stainless steel, and certain ways of working can be safe with stainless steel, but a large amount of the stainless steel out there is not super high quality, and stainless steel inherently has toxic metals in them, like cadmium. So this is a risk that you could be pulling into your work, particularly if, let's say a simple, let's say you calcined your herb in a stainless steel pan and maybe it's not contaminated at that point, and then you finish your work for the night, and you just leave your ashes in the pan overnight, and then the ashes absorb some atmospheric water, and now you've
Yep.
got essentially, a strong alkali liquid in a stainless steel pan, and these salts, these alkali salts in liquid form, can be even more reactive with the stainless steel that you're using, perhaps absorbing some of these heavy metals. So we try to really look into like some of the nuances of that, the pros and cons of different materials. It's not that we say there's only one to use. We try to make a few different suggestions and kind of educate on it, so you can maybe make some of these decisions yourself when hunting for different materials that you may want to use for calcination, because there are a variety of them that you can use, and there's again a degree of nuance where it's like maybe this stainless steel would be okay but this one is not. Maybe this glass is okay to use but this one is not. Maybe
Yeah.
this type of earthenware clay is good and this one is not. So we try to give a heads up to like some of the things that you're looking out for when selecting like a material to do calcinations in order to not only have success in the operation, but make sure that you're not unintentionally putting toxic heavy metals in your final product. So yeah, that's something I would highlight about that.
I remember early on in my practice, I got some ceramic bowls to calcine some things with, and I had done this. I had worked with this plant 3 or 4 times through calcination, and for whatever reason, this one time I looked in there and there was a little bit of like bluish ash in there, and I was like, oh my god, I reached this like new stage of calcination or whatever, and then I did a little bit of research, and it's like, nope, those are just the minerals coming out of the out of the ceramic crucible.
Copper or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, no, and
yeah,
colored salt, they can be confusing, right? Because sometimes it is a part of the work, like a red salt, a yellow salt, or sometimes even a blue salt. Like there's famous
yeah,
blue
sure.
salt with wine tartar. And again, it's just like when we talked about the camphor volatilizing, and you thinking you have a sublimated fixed salt, mineral salt, but
Hmm.
really you just have it's it looks the same to your eye, but the reality of what it is something else. So yeah, the again back to nuance. Like this is some of the stuff we really tried to dig into in this course material is um, really diving into the details so you're less easily fooled by sometimes what is a false positive, and sometimes is okay,
Yeah,
yeah, I succeeded in this
beginner's
work.
luck. Yeah.
A big yeah. So there's a lot of detail and nuance, which I think is really important to having a successful and safe practice with spagyrics and alchemy.
I've made that mistake too with a. I was making a tincture of chaga actually, and I had a little homemade incubator, which was just like a giant cooler with like a seed heater at the bottom, right? And so I'd put everything in there, and I had this large mason jar with the tincture in there, and it was just circulating and circulating. And I come back to it after a couple months, and I look in there, and I see these like crystal formations crawling up the side of the glassware, and I was like,
Hmm.
oh my god, was this like the volatile salt of chaga? Like I was just kind of like mind blown. I took all these pictures and everything, and then showed it to a couple more experienced practitioners, and they're like, no, it's likely just this compound that's crawling up. And you just don't even think about these things, right? You get so caught up with the allure and the physical manifestation that you sometimes just don't apply critical thinking to like explore the compounds of the products you're really working with, of the herbs you're working with.
For sure. And I think, I mean, therein lies, I think this is another reasoning behind like why pulling something like modern chemistry and science into our current paradigm with alchemy is so useful, because, if but we're reading a traditional text and it's describing the visual aspect of the stages of the work, we can again, we can sometimes get a false positive and think that we've achieved something which we haven't, and eventually it's going to come back
Yeah.
and bite you, or the work isn't going to go to completion because you've misstepped, you've misunderstood something. And chemistry is a great way of helping us understand that. And what I'd say too is people say, "Oh, you're taking the magic out of it." It's like all of this stuff is still amazing. Like
Yes.
the camphor volatilizing in a distillation and crystallizing inside of your glassware is beautiful. Camphor is an amazing compound. It doesn't need to be a volatile potassium salt to be amazing. Or the shaga thing. It's again, all of these things are amazing aspects of nature, and I think the better we
Yeah.
understand them, the more amazing they are, not the less amazing they are. And I think, arguably, in my case, in my experience, it actually gives us a sharper understanding of the philosophical truths of alchemy and spagyrics. Because I don't want to. I'm not looking to move away from these traditional understandings. It's quite the opposite. I think that alchemy is special and unique from chemistry because it is so focused on the meaning, the purpose, like the why,
Yeah.
this deeper truth that is underlying the
Yeah.
physicality of all of this. That to me, learning to understand the chemical or physical aspects of the work just deepens your understanding, deepens your incentive to search after truth. I don't think that
Yep.
it's taking away from the unique value of alchemy and its philosophy.
Totally. Totally. So we've already already glossed over a couple of these next couple of questions here. So, maybe we kind of start to wrap it up with talking about like what results should a student be able to see in their own practice or their preparations after they've gone through the 3-month course.
Yeah, well, I really want to just double down again that, if we're looking at the simple building blocks or blueprint of spagyrics and alchemy, again, it has an inherent aspect of holism. So if we are
Yeah.
to take something apart into its individual pieces, maybe refine them in a certain way, and bring them back together again, um, there needs to be true wholeness. Like there needs to be true homogeny. Like like a bear has all of its limbs attached to it. Like if the leg
Yeah.
is over there, like it's not complete. There's something wrong. So in the end, of your work, whichever way you're working, and we're gonna explore multiple ways of working with both liquid and solid extracts, and again, these 3 different types of extracts addressing different aspects of our health. I think a real pinnacle of what we're trying to impress through this curriculum is bringing things back into completion, which I think we can make not only a philosophical argument for it, but we can make a chemical argument for it as well, which is something that we'll dive into. Like, why could this hypothetically or even theoretically be a more whatever bioavailable or potent,
Yeah.
even safe compound?
Cool.
So that's again, in a nutshell, one of the most important things that we hope people take away from this class.
Is there anything that you kind of want to share or express that you really want to share with people if they're considering the program?
Well, I mean, I know I'm a bit of a super nerd. I love talking about, and I think for a first time, somebody who's new to the subject, may listen to a conversation like this and think like, this is way over my head.
Yeah.
This is too brainy or whatever. And what I would say is that, I really would like beginners as well as advanced students who are interested and what we have to say about this and what we have to share about this, to not feel, yeah, to not feel intimidated by it. We're going to keep small class sizes. Online is limited. It's something I've struggled with for a long time. Bringing more focus into online teaching, since alchemy is difficult enough, and to try to transmit it online just adds a whole other layer of difficulty to that transmission. So we're intentionally going to keep classes really small. Our focus is interaction. We will have maybe some
Yeah.
short pre-recorded like tutorial videos of processes and things like that, but the focus is going to be on classes, live classes, which will be recorded if, let's say, you missed one, and our forum as well, which I'll be moderating on a daily basis. So, there's kind of a daily opportunity for people to interact both with me as an instructor and all of the other students. I mean, the people that are enrolling so far, there's so many amazing people with amazing experience and different talents and perspectives on all this that we'll all be able to learn from. And so whether you're really experienced or you're a brand new person, this is going to be accessible, and we're going to help hold each other up, even though some of it may be a lot to a first time person, or maybe it's going to be a lot for somebody who's experienced in alchemy, but maybe some of this is foreign to them. And by having a small class, we're going to be able to personalize it in a way, have a rapport, speaking back and forth, finding different examples and ways to explain and explore these concepts, which make sense to each person in the class. Because I think that's something amazing about alchemy, is that it's so inclusive. So whether you're a really spiritual person of a certain religion, or your own unique spirituality, or you're maybe not so much into that aspect and you're really scientific minded, there's going to be a way for everybody to kind of latch on to these teachings in a unique way. We're going to make a big attempt to make this as universal as possible. So again, if some of this stuff is a little bit, it seems a little bit over the top, we're kind of speaking in a way today as if everybody in the audience at least knows a little bit about the subject already. So don't worry about it. We're gonna start at the beginning, and build things up and make sense of it all and go step by step. So that's something I'd like to impress upon people.
Cool. Well, I'll just say, as someone who first encountered alchemy 10 years ago now, and spent several years just reading books, studying, taking products, incorporating the alchemical traditions and philosophies into my own practices, and then starting, having several years of lab experience in my home lab, I've taken multiple courses online. I've taken multiple in-person programs. I've worked with several different teachers, both in person and online. And what I can personally say is that what we are creating here through our online programming, our forum, our community-based offerings, the workshops that we have coming up, and also these 3 months intensives. This, I wish this existed years ago. It would have saved me a lot of time, would have saved me a lot of headache. And I just really have enjoyed working with you on this because of how much you are focused on creating a positive student-teacher experience. We're having a big focus on the community. We've been, building out this site. We're going to be making some refinements to the community elements of this as well. But, I think the big thing is that, we're not just going to have like slideshow presentations. We're going to be doing live demonstrations. We're going to be doing, pre-recorded tutorials so that there's nothing left unchecked in terms of like someone understanding what they're doing and how to do it. So I just wanted to share that because
yeah,
this is going to be exciting.
I'm excited too. And I think, I think a lot of the motivation I've had, and I'm like, is the same reasons you're saying. Like, I think there's a lot of things I wish I had earlier on, and I'm trying to fill in blanks that I had. At the same time, I want to make sure to give credence to all the people that helped lift me up to where I am too. It's not just, we're making these statements about like, different ways of doing things, things that may be, miss or misunderstood or not optimal, so there's somewhat, maybe a bit of a negative connotation if you look at it in one way. But what I'll say is that, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for my teachers. And none of this is a
Totally.
criticism against any
Yeah.
teacher of mine or
Zero.
any book that I've read. Like, these are the building blocks of who I am and why I'm here. If it weren't for them, I wouldn't be able to make the mistakes I made, which led me to deeper understanding of things. I just, I owe it all to all of these people, whether dead or alive.
Yep.
And, I'm going to say number one, too, I always give thanks to my number one living teacher, Robert Bartlett. This approach that I take in trying to combine modern chemistry and the traditional philosophy of alchemy and spagyrics. Like, I learned this from him predominantly. This is when this
Yep.
really started to land for me, is listening to him speak, listening to him teach, reading his books, and also, something that's so important that I got from Robert Bartlett is open-mindedness.
Sure.
The ability to be eclectic, to pull from many different sources of truth and inspiration, to zero in closer to, this great work that we're participating in, right? Without these people, and again, I thank mistakes. I thank the great, adversary in life, because this is this Saturnian aspect of our life. Adversity, or if you want to personify it, the adversary. It's these problems, mistakes, things not working out, things not being as good as you hoped that they would be. These are the inspirations that push us further and further into understanding truth, and to, perfecting our unique personal journey and relationship with alchemy, medicine making, medicine, healing ourselves and healing others through sharing medicine. So, yeah, I really want to make sure that I say that, because
Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
this is not about putting anybody or anything down, or
No, not at
saying,
all.
we're right and you're wrong. Yeah, trying to offer, yeah, some of the new gifts that come from the natural evolution of student to
Yes.
teacher, student to teacher, student to teacher, right? I think this is the
100%.
point of the succession like that.
And shout out to all of our peers too, all the other people on Instagram, all of our peers, around the world, who are constantly, sharing their work, sharing their insights, their philosophies, their aha moments. Like, the alchemical community, I think, has never been larger than what it is today. And I think that is like just a really powerful thing to note, because all the great civilizations throughout history, there was alchemy at the root of their scientific advancements. There was alchemy at the root of their spiritual processes. And so I just, part of my prayer for this is that we can bring alchemy to the world, not just for the spiritual and the laboratory and the medicine making, but also to, bring this paradigm to a new exalted level of awareness that can then be used to advance humanity's evolution, for everyone across the board,
For
people
sure.
and those in nature.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's what it's about, right? Many hands make light work. I love that quote. We're here together for a reason, so
Yeah.
helping each other out along our sometimes confusing and difficult journeys in life. That's what it's all about. So if we can play a small part in this particular field that we're working in, we hope that, yeah, it'll radiate out and have a net positive.
It will. It will indeed. Awesome.
We're gonna
All
try.
right, Daniel. Yeah. All right, Daniel. Thanks for joining. And for those of you that are listening in, you can go to our website, lumina-alchemy.com. You can also check out our Instagram, Lumina Alchemy, as well. And we'll have this up on a couple other different social platforms here soon enough. And this Gateway Herbal program, Vegetabilia 1, is going to be starting here in February 2026. We have enrollment going until the first week of February, and we've already got about a dozen students or so in there. So we hope you join us all, and we are looking forward to diving into this new chapter in both our personal stories, your personal practices, and alchemy as a whole. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We'll talk to you soon.
Good night.